Welcome back to the Peninsulas. I'm Laura. As I said in the intro video, I live in Florida, and I'm up for doing the first video for our channel this week, and I'm going to be talking about prepping quail for wintertime. It's quite a bit different here in Florida from up in Michigan where Shannon is. As you can see, it's about 80 degrees here versus 50, 52 where she is, so quite a bit different, and it's only getting maybe in the 50s and 40s at night here, but I understand from up there they've already had some freezing weather, so it will be quite different winter prep for Florida, but I wanted to show you guys kind of what I do anyway, and maybe just talk about some quail maintenance in general. So this first kind of larger quail pen I have here, I call it my brooder box, and this is where I typically put my hatchlings after they've come out of the incubator and after they have been indoors for a while. So basically, when they're old enough to live outside by themselves, they go in this big brooder box situation, and they can live in there for about 8 weeks. And then they're mature at that point, and they kind of start to fight. The males start fighting each other, and the females pick on each other and the males as well. So at that point, it's important to kind of sort through them, pick out the males, and then I like to put one male per 5 or 6 females, depending on how many I have of each. But one male does quite well with about 5 or 6 females. They can do 7, 8 is pushing it, and I think you start to have more kind of unrest in the cage when you have that many females at play. But I also, by the time the quail are mature, I like to sort them also based on personality, and you kind of know by then which ones are the bullies, which ones are kind of more timid, which ones are bold, and which ones are afraid, and I try to pair them up that way. So if I have a little timid male, I try to put him with the kind of calmer, more passive females. And then if I have a bunch of big dominant females, I try to put them with maybe a male that can stand up for himself a little bit better. So by the time they're 8 weeks, you kind of know how they act and who might go well with each other. So, but it is important to keep an eye on this, because as they get to maturity, they do start to fight, and you can have some bloodied heads, and it's just tragic. So best to keep on top of it. So basically, this is kind of my routine maintenance for the quail. I like to give them fresh sand, probably about once a month, but when I'm not giving them a whole fresh batch, I just get in there with a screen that I put on a frame. So I made this little shaking instrument where you can shake all the sand out, but it gets all the debris and you can throw it out. I just chuck it under the quail pen, because after it accumulates a little bit, then I can rake it up and go put it on my plant or something like that. So it's just kind of convenient. So I just kind of rake through the sand, sift all the manure and hay and rocks and whatever else is feathers, whatever is floating around in there, and just give them a new sand area. They really like this particular sand area because it's all enclosed. It's got some windows along the top, but it's nice and dark in there, and I think they feel like they're hiding. Quail like to hide a lot, so they go in there and have a nice dust bath, and I feel like they're safe while they're doing it. So I really like the way this big brooder is set up, and it gives them kind of more room to move around. In kind of the middle section on the other side of the sandbox, that's where I typically will put hay. So during the summer, I don't give them a lot of hay. It's harder to find the eggs, but also I don't want them to get overheated. But I give them just enough to kind of feel like they're blending in. Ideally, one day I would like to build probably larger enclosures for all the quail, where they can have branches and sticks, logs, just things that they would maybe run out in the wild and make them feel more at home. But for right now, this is kind of the setup we have. And I think they kind of enjoy the winter time because they get a really thick, big pile of hay to burrow into, and they seem to really love it. So that's where I put their hay, in the middle section. And then the end is where I just put their feed, their little feed bucket, and their watering system is set up there as well. They're just gravity fed little cups connected to a tube, connected to a 5-gallon bucket on top. And that has worked very well. I only have to fill up the bucket maybe once a week in the summer and maybe once every 2 weeks in the winter when they're not so thirsty. But it's nice, very low maintenance. And as you can see, it's really not hard to kind of clean out the quail and to give them fresh, either fresh sand or fresh hay. It doesn't take very long, so it's not arduous. They're pretty easy birds to keep, and they're a lot of fun too. So in my stacked cages, the dynamic is a little bit different. I do wish that they were larger, but the main thing that I would change if I would make them again would be to put the door on the side instead of at the end, because it's very hard to reach all the way in there to get eggs and things from the end, whereas if it was on the side, you could just reach all in there and it wouldn't be a problem. Plus these little guys like to fly out when you're not expecting it, so it makes it a bit awkward to collect eggs from the end like that. In my other quail stand with 3 cages like this, I did make the doors on the side, and it's a lot easier to manage, and I can reach the entire cage without much effort. So if you're thinking of making stacked quail cages, I definitely recommend a side door. But these ones work well. I just had old kind of worm-eaten wood laying around, and so I picked the better pieces and kind of screwed this whole thing together, and it's held up really well. I've had this cage probably about 2 years, so it works well. So I have 1 male, typically per 5 female in these little cages, and they do pretty well with the size. I feel like they could use bigger space, but I haven't had the time or resources to build them a bigger place yet, but hopefully in the future I will. But this little guy on top, that's Wibble Wobble. He's my original male, and then his 2 hens are Flossie and Flossie's cousin, and they're my favorites because they are the original ones. So they're 3 years old at this point. I didn't think quail were supposed to live that long, but they're holding out. The 3 other females that were with them in the cage sadly have passed already, which I guess was not unexpected, but I'm glad that these guys are still around. So that's why you see only 1 male and 2 females in this cage. But they're happy, and they've been together for 3 years, so I don't want to disrupt their dynamic. But the blue trays in between each layer are just so handy and really easy to clean. I typically will dump them around my plants and things like that, but I just took them over to the woods to show you how easy it is to just scrape them off and put them back. So this just keeps the droppings contained and from falling on the head of their friends beneath. So it just makes for a very simple cleaning, and it's nice to collect all those droppings to be able to put around plants. I don't put these directly on the plants because they might be too acidic, they might burn the actual plant, but I'll put these droppings around on the dirt around plants so that they can seep in over time and help build up the soil. The soil here in Florida is not very well, there are some places that have really good soil, but my particular piece of land, it's a mixture of kind of just sandy soil and clay, depending on where you dig. So I wouldn't necessarily consider it very nutrient-rich soil. So I really enjoy just trying to build it up for my garden and my food forest as much as possible. So that's what I use the droppings for. Another side note with these stacked quail cages, if you do have a design like this, be sure to enclose the bottom with something substantial like plywood. I had enclosed the bottoms of these with chicken wire, but in my other stack of cages, not shown here, I found out that was not sufficient, and raccoons got in. They just completely shredded the chicken wire and got in there, and were able to get at my quail from underneath. So that was pretty devastating, but a learning experience. So since then, I have definitely put plywood around the bottom of my stacked cages. I have not gotten to do that for this particular stack yet, which is why there are no quail in the bottom cage of this stack. But very important to fortify really heavily against varmints. Around here we have a lot of possums, a lot of raccoons. I've seen bobcats as well. So every varmint is sniffing around wanting to eat them. But yeah, so this is just kind of routine maintenance for my quail. I just scrape out the old hay, make sure that their water buckets are full, make sure their feed bins are full. And then I have little sand boxes in these 2x3 cages. I went to the thrift store and I bought these bins. I don't know what they were used for, but they make excellent little sand boxes for these quail. And so I just clean them out as well, and then I'll put fresh sand in from time to time as they need it. And they're really good about sharing the space. Usually there's one or two of them in there at a time. But when I put the fresh sand in, it's so cute because they all get in at once and they're all fluffing and there's sand flying everywhere. So that's really cute. But typically if you go by the cages, you'll see one or two in there just having a good time. So it's a good size sandbox for this little space. And then as you can see, the water cups in this design are stacked instead of in a row. So there's one per cage. And that works really well too, since you only have usually a maximum of 6 or so birds in this little space. That design's worked really well. So I just wanted to kind of show you the quail routine and some of what goes into prepping them for winter, which is really not much. Shannon will show you a more in-depth video about how to actually prep for very cold weather. Around here, the coldest we usually get is 20 degrees. Sometimes we'll get down into the teens, but it's very rare. And we don't get snow. We do get a little icy sometimes, but nothing too crazy. So just a little bit of extra hay for these guys is sufficient for keeping them warm. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we will hit you in the next one. Shannon will be posting about her quail and her winterizing in the next video. If you like this content, please like and subscribe for more.